If you watch current scientific discussions on the nature of reality, if you watch the current debates on the nature of reality, then I'm sure you're very familiar with why scientists are having a difficult time reconciling the quantum world with the classical world. And as you know, quantum mechanics cannot be reconciled with general relativity, which includes gravity. So let's understand reality from a different perspective. Again, from the yogic perspective. Okay, think from experience, yogic experience, what I'm going to share with you. So, from the yogic and non dual perspective, reality is understood not as an independent objective phenomenon, but as a dynamic interplay of fluctuations, vrittis within consciousness. The most famous verse in yoga, Chit Vritti Nirodh. Yoga is getting in touch with reality by going beyond the fluctuations of the mind. In this view, both the classical world, the realm of tangible sensory experience, and the quantum world, the subtle probabilistic domain underlying physical reality, are interpretations of these fluctuations, which are essentially sensations, sense perceptions, images, feelings, thoughts. The classical world arises from the interpretation of perceptual or sensory vrittis, while the quantum world emerges from the interpretation of subtler fluctuations. Crucially, these interpretations themselves are vrittis, interpretations themselves are fluctuations of consciousness. So the framework that I'm proposing posits that what we perceive as reality is species specific, a manifestation of entangled minds, bodies, and worlds shaped by the unique vrittis of each species. Think about that. In yogic philosophy, particularly as outlined in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, vrittis are mental modifications or fluctuations within consciousness, which is called chitta. These fluctuations give rise to perceptions, thoughts, emotions, and interpretations of reality. Patanjali emphasizes that liberation or kaivalya is achieved by stilling these fluctuations. Yog Chit Vritti Nirodh, revealing pure consciousness, Purusha, Shiva, beyond the distortions of mental activity. And from this perspective, the classical world, the everyday reality we experience through our senses, not an objective truth, but a construct shaped by sensory vrittis. These fluctuations interpret raw sensory data into coherent forms, objects, people, events. The solidity and stability we attribute to classical world or the classical world are merely habitual patterns of perception arising from repeated sensory interpretations. While the classical world is rooted in gross sensory vrittis, the quantum world corresponds to subtler fluctuations within consciousness. Quantum phenomena such as wave-particle duality, entanglement, and superposition defy classical logical thinking and point to a deeper level of reality that is probabilistic and interconnected. And from a yogic perspective, these phenomena can be seen as arising from subtle vrittis that operate beneath the threshold of ordinary sensory perception. The quantum domain reveals that what we consider matter is not solid or fixed, but is a dynamic interplay of the superposition of possibilities of experiences. These possibilities collapse into specific outcomes only when observed or measured, a process that parallels the yogic insight that perception shapes reality. Just as sensory vrittis interpret gross phenomena into tangible forms, subtle vrittis interpret quantum fluctuations into probabilistic patterns. Both levels of interpretation are functions of consciousness itself. So, this shatters the illusion of objectivity. A key insight from this perspective is that interpretations, whether of sensory data or quantum phenomena, are themselves vrittis. This challenges the notion of an objective reality existing independently of perception. Instead, reality is co created between consciousness and its fluctuations, modified form of consciousness itself. The act of interpreting sensory input or subtle quantum events is not passive but active. It shapes what is experienced as real. So, this also aligns with non dual teachings that assert that subject and object are not separate but arise together within consciousness. The observer and the observed are entangled aspects of a single unified awareness. And from this standpoint, both the classical and quantum worlds are appearances within consciousness, differentiated only by the level of subtlety in their corresponding vrittis. The idea that reality is species specific further deepens this understanding. Different species experience different realities because their sensory apparatus and cognitive structures generate different patterns of vrittis. For example, a human perceives color through three types of cone cells in the retina, while a mantis shrimp perceives color through 12 types. As a result, their realities not often, dramatically differ always. Similarly, bats navigate through echolocation rather than vision. Their interpretation of space arises from auditory vrittis. So, from this perspective, what we call the world is not a singular objective entity, but a species specific construct arising from entangled minds, bodies, and environments. Each species uniquely contributes to its own world because of the configuration of vrittis, which give rise to its unique experiences of reality. This interdependence reflects the non dual insight that mind, subject, body, instrument, and world, object, are not separate entities, but interconnected expressions within consciousness itself. While this framework explains how realities arise through species specific vrittis, yogic philosophy ultimately points toward transcending these fluctuations altogether. Liberation involves recognizing that all interpretations, whether gross or subtle, are modifications within consciousness and do not define its true nature. By stilling the mind's fluctuation through practices like meditation and self inquiry, Atma Vichar, one can rest in pure awareness beyond all distinctions between classical and quantum, gross and subtle, subject and object. In the liberated state, we realize that both the classical world and the quantum world are appearances within consciousness, temporary expressions of its infinite potentiality. The ultimate reality is that pure awareness, unchanging, formless, and beyond all conceptualization and comprehension, and yet giving rise to concepts and comprehension. So, in conclusion, from a yogic and non dual perspective, both the classical world and the quantum world are interpretations arising from different levels of vrittis. Sensory fluctuations give rise to gross perceptions of reality and form the classical realm, while subtler fluctuations manifest as probabilistic patterns in the quantum domain. These interpretations themselves are functions of consciousness, a dynamic interplay within awareness rather than an objective external truth. Furthermore, what we experience as reality is species specific, a co created phenomenon shaped by entangled minds, bodies, and environments unique to each species' configuration of vrittis. Ultimately, liberation lies in transcending all such fluctuations to rest in pure awareness, the groundless ground from which all appearances arise and into which they subside. Have a holy day, divine day, grounded in the groundless ground.